update. Uighur with us there, bringing us all the latest figures and impact of that new coronavirus. Well, it's time now to turn our attention to the newspapers. Roman Polanski is back with us for a look through that. And this time, Roman, we're going to start in the United States, where Democratic candidate Pete Buttigieg has announced that, well, he's out of the race.
That's right. It's the latest twist in what's already been a highly eventful campaign. And the candidate who initially won the first caucus in Iowa has dropped out just a month later. There's an article by The Guardian which analyzes the successes and failures of Pete Buttigieg's campaign. It underlines, first of all, the audacity of this presidential bid for a 37-year-old openly gay candidate with limited political experience. And there was a moment where he seemed best placed to rally the moderate voters, and he looked like he could go all the way, especially after this Iowa caucus. But the article argues that Mayor Pete failed to extend that success to more racially diverse states like Nevada and South Carolina, where there's large proportions of black voters and where he was easily beaten by Joe Biden in those two states.
Indeed, Pete Buttigieg hasn't endorsed any of the other candidates, but now that he's gone, the contest largely currently seen between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden.
Well, it's true, and it looks like momentum is currently with Joe Biden now more than ever, with Buttigieg dropping out and, of course, his win in South Carolina. Now, the New Yorker published a column looking at Biden's South Carolina victory, a blowout victory, according to the article, that could be a turning point for his campaign, and why not mark the start of a surprising comeback after his poor start in Iowa. Now, the article argues that while Joe Biden is still trailing Bernie Sanders, who remains the frontrunner, he's now emerging as the only viable alternative to the Vermont senator, especially among moderate voters. However, there is still the issue for Biden of Mike Bloomberg, who's also competing for those moderate votes and who spend a fortune campaigning in Super Tuesday states, which are voting next. And of course, Bloomberg looks unlikely to drop out for now. Now, this analysis can be tempered a little bit by another article by the Washington Post, which says that we shouldn't buy into this Joe Biden momentum. The author is a lot less optimistic about Biden's chances. He argues that his South Carolina win was largely a feature of demographics, as he swept the black vote, as we said, which represents their 57% of all voters in that state. And no other state, according to this article, will offer him such a valuable terrain. For instance, delegate-rich California is a case in point, with black voters only representing 7% of all total voters there, while Latinos and Hispanics, which a group which Bernie Sanders is traditionally leading, represent about 33% of all voters. The author concludes it doesn't mean Biden has no chance, that he can't win, but his chances remain slim at the moment, and his best bet, according to this article, would be a contested convention at the end, with the superdelegates ultimately picking the candidate.
Sounds like still quite a long way to go in that delegate race. Let's move on, Laurent, to another story you wanted to highlight. It's an investigative report piece that says that China has been forcing members of the Uighur minority to work in factories.
Well, I saw these revelations this morning, and they're addressed here in The Telegraph, which uses the term forced labor to describe the situation. Now, it all stems from an investigation by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which found that at least 80,000 Uyghurs were being forced to work in factories, including of well-known brands like Nike and Apple in China. The Institute claims that they were sent there after attending these infamous re-education camps where Uyghurs are being sent. An estimated 3 million Uyghurs are being detained at the moment, and that they're not really given a choice or the opportunity to escape or to leave. And while on the ground, these researchers have found several factories equipped with watchtowers, barbed wires, and even police guards, where Uyghur workers were saying they're unable to leave, even return home for the holidays. Now, this, of course, puts additional strain, additional pressure on Beijing, which is already coming under fire for its dismal human rights record.
Let's move back to France, Alon, for your last story. And there's been a lot of reactions and columns and opinion pieces criticising Roman Polanski's Academy Award, the French Academy Award, getting a César at the weekend.
That's right, and well, this one is a very powerful and strongly worded column by French writer Virginie. Virginie Despentes, and well, it's really expressing her disgust with the ceremony and more widely with the patriarchal norms that continue to shape and dominate our society. For instance, she says that Polanski's win wasn't surprising, but it remains and I quote, grotesque, insulting and awful occurrence, an orgy of impunity by the powerful who just want to assert their domination and their dominance on the oppressed. And well, the author makes a wider point talking about the government and drawing a parallel with the ongoing pensions reform and the use by the government of Article 49.3 of the Constitution to force it through Parliament. And she's saying that it's the same thing. Those in power want others to stay silent, to bow their heads, to not challenge their decisions. It may be a bit far-fetched, but I encourage you to read that column. It's really wonderfully written, a bit violent at times, but well worth the read. Of course, the author also salutes the decision by actress Adèle Haenel to leave the room when Polanski's win was announced, and she encourages everyone to do the same, to get up and leave in the face of this show of impunity.
Okay, definitely one I'll pick up when I go back upstairs. Laurent Bersteker with the press review. Thanks a lot for that.